Hello? Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Oh, oh, ee, ee. Okay. Welcome. I remembered to do the notifications for going live, getting more consistent. I have to take these small wins where we can get them. Also, I sent off the first bracelet that was requested from subscriber, viewer, mod, lovely person, Tan. Thank you very much, Tan. And I am excited for you to get it. I sent a little blessing along with it using my Hydra power of blessing. And also, not like I did this, but Hydra people also have the capacity to curse others. So I'm going to be using this strategically in the future. So watch out. Namaste. Welcome. Clapping 3 times is a symbol that Hydra people use to announce their presence, to invoke a spirit of access to godliness and blessing others, or using these powers, access to wisdom, to help other people, also possibly to curse other people. This is what it has meant historically. With colonization, it has come to mean more of Hydra people being marginalized and being in the streets a lot and asking for money in order to be able to live in society. And I know that there are some activists, Hydra activists, that are wanting to eliminate the practice in general of clapping at signals like stoplights for asking for money. And I think it's time we reclaim this and use it how it was originally intended, as a way to invoke power. And so I'm going to be doing this now, I think, at the beginning of every stream. There you go. It's another day, another stream in fascist America. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. I'm Aubri Devashrayee. They, them, Hydra, non-binary, queer, tastic, queerific host. I don't know. Welcome. So, on Mondays, we go over headlines. I did not do this last week because with everything going on, there are some wins happening in the US, some wins happening in the world that I think are good to be focusing on, but also there is a lot of bullshit and unconscionable violence that is just a lot. And I know that talking about it or learning about it is not nearly as harmful or impactful as experiencing this shit. It is a privilege to be able to not tune in sometimes. I do personally, but there are times when I can feel like there is this oversaturation of commentary on such things, and that when these things happen, maybe one of my roles or a place that I can actually provide something that is a little bit different, that still resonates with me, is talking about history and decolonization and how important it is to talk about what actually works with resisting these things. So that's my take, at least. Hello, Aliana. Welcome. Do you have signal? I do. I do have signal. I'm doing all right. Just keeping on, trying to trying to usher in what is meant for me, whatever that means. So, trying to practice like the art of letting go, of not trying to control too much, but also focusing on what's in my power. It's an interesting balance. Counter surveillance tools. Ooh. Yes, I would love that. Thank you very much. Exactly. Third eye, third eye chakra. Reclaiming this power, decolonizing it. Okay, cool. Yeah, I know you're part of the Discord, so if you want to DM me there, that would be awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, friend. How are you doing? On the Discord. Yeah, yeah, go for it. Okay. While you were doing that, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think like any type of education, additional learning and knowledge to arm ourselves is really important. Now I'm in Discord. Okay. You're stressed? Oh no. What's going on, if you don't mind me asking? Wasn't in the Discord before. Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. Well, welcome. Glad to have you there. No allowed on what's stressing you on Signal. Mm-hmm. Okay. I got you. A good obedient pup. Very good. I love that. Yeah, exactly. Like, we need to reduce the harm where we can. Good for you. For your consensual obedience. I love this. And thank you. I appreciate all of the tips too. Okay. So, just so that we can get more into the body of what I have planned today, this is a short by The Onion called Should We Do More to Reduce Violence in Our Dreams? Which, I mean, my dreams can be extremely nightmarish. If they have any tips, great. But just focusing on like how the world is focused. The world is not interested for the most part, or I guess I should say the powers that be are not as interested in reducing violence in the world at general, especially to the working class. But that it's like, maybe we need to focus on something that is intangential, intangible. That's the word I'm looking for. Well, built on foundations of anarchy, it's consensual, it's equal. Yeah, I agree. That's something that we were talking about a little bit ago. I know you were talking about this in the chat as well as Anarcho Taco, of like that there is a lot of crossover between anarchists who are engaged in kink and how uh like there's a diversity, a huge diversity of thought within anarchism, but how there are people that think um or like many people who think that like we should have as part of anarchism that like we should have a say in whatever affects us, and that it's like, yeah, most of these structures are top down rather than democratic. They try to pretend to be democratic, and often that keeps us subservient rather than having more of a say in what happens in our everyday lives. So I think that's fun to be able to talk about the theory, also engage in like play, like quite literally, especially like types of like pet play and stuff. I enjoy this as well. And talking about how it's a way of taking our power back. Many kinky anarchists, personally a freak. Find two lovers a month. I mean, yeah, like do what you like. It's like that is part of autonomy, and pushing back against these bullshit puritanical structures and norms that are trying to tell us like what we should do with our bodies, who we should love, who we can love, who we should be, how we should present. Yeah, exactly. Autonomy. And that it's like engaging in your own understanding of what you like is a form of resistance, is a form of revolution, in my opinion, like soft revolution, I guess, to be reclaiming this. I know there are many people like Audre Lorde has called out in like being a self-identifying Black lesbian warrior poet, which is really fierce, is that we can't have a true type of consensual relationship in like its purest form. I mean, if we're not talking about like purity or whatever, in like its realist form until we deconstruct these systems that are inherently oppressive. So like a way to access our own autonomy and free will is to like engage in free consensual power exchange. But until we have these systems around us that are deconstructed, that are oppressive and are marginalizing people, it is still somewhat of a cheapened version of like the full scope of what it could be to be accessing free will. So like holding all of these things at the same time. Purity, as in not mixing your energies and forming bonds with toxic people rather than suppressing yourself. Yeah, I like that, of like having this self-respect and honoring who you are, making sure that like you're protecting your energy. I'm very much trying to focus on that more in life lately. Sex being one way of mixing energies. Yeah, you may get good energy if you sleep with people who are good vibes and genuine souls. True. Like in this, like, that's very like Kama Sutra esque to be like, oh, we're engaging in something that has a lot of power to it, not only in like reclamation of self and identity, but also like honoring each other's consent, engaging in like our own sense of pleasure that like can be a form of like bonding, but also magic. Kama Sutra. Kama Sutra is an older text in Hinduism that believes more in like the physical joining of people, that like in its original form before colonization it was hella queer. There is mention of hydra people, hi, of third gender people, people outside of a gender binary, where it is a way to like you can worship gods, but you can also like worship another person, like worship each other, like worship yourself. 9% battery. No, you're good. Thanks for being here with the limited, as we're talking about energy, with the limited energy that you have. Yeah, and it's also like talking about like ways to like expand pleasure, but also like to reach like another realm of magic almost. And I love that. My religion we call Kama Sutra marriage, the union of flesh and spirit, conjoining of soul and physical being. That's why you have to be picky with who you sleep with. Yeah, exactly. Especially like being a Scorpio. I'm like, I think there's a lot of power in that, of like embracing your sexuality and also like a literal exchange of energy, and how like it can, like what you're saying, be a mutually like beneficial situation that is empowering for everyone involved, and it can also be very harmful in ways. Yeah, no worries, do what you need to do. Okay, let's get into this short. Should we do more to reduce violence in our dreams?
Should we be doing more to reduce the level of violence in our dreams?
I'll take any
all
tips.
too often the violence in my dreams is totally gratuitous or done by my brain just to shock me.
You know, I know what you mean. For example, the other night I had a dream in which I lost my car, and when I finally found it, it was full of dismembered limbs. Now, is all of that gore really necessary?
Yes, you can't close your eyes without being bombarded with horrible images. Wild animals, crazed killers.
Blood-drenched Best Buy employee trying to sell you a dead baby.
The statistics show the dream-inspired violence is on the rise.
My dreams got so violent, I stopped sleeping months ago.
When was the last time you actually slept, Nancy?
Get those motherfucking spiders off of me.
Damn.
Should we be doing more to reduce the level of violence in our
no.
dreams?
Lack of sleep, that really is brutal, which is why, you know, it affects everything with health, and you can hallucinate if you are not getting enough sleep. And there are many evil forces that use it as a form of torture because it affects everything. But that's something that I've like brought up to like when I've like had times of going to therapy. I'm like, yeah, I have a lot of nightmares, and people are like, they like look concerned, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't know how to like break that down, and then they don't really know what to do a lot of the time. So I'm like, okay, I guess we just deal with it. So this speaks to me. Are dreams becoming too violent? I mean, they really have been in my experience, but it makes it so like waking up maybe it's like mornings are not my thing, or it's like, oh, what is happening? But also a way to escape. My dreams sometimes are prophetic. Ooh, that's cool. Sometimes mine are as well. It depends though. Sometimes they're just like out of control with nonsense and fear. But also there are some things that happen that I'm like, interesting. You're in tune with that. I love that. Didn't you say you're a Gemini, I think? At least from what I remember. Okay, so let's get into the headlines. We'll talk briefly about headlines and then get into the history of ballroom because we are nearing the end of Pride Month. I want to talk about some of our queer elders who even started the riot that turned into what we know of as Pride, and that the people who don't want to acknowledge these origins or the necessary concept, necessary action in resisting police violence that also represents the violence of these larger systems that oppress us as queer people, especially when we experience intersections of marginalization, that we need to be talking about it. And to the people who want to say that they're allies, or even queer people who are like, oh, we need to like resist this, but then they somehow can't see the harm that like cops cause and don't want to do the work of decolonizing their minds, like that's part of the problem. So we'll continue talking about this. Like when I dreamt of that your aunt being pregnant. You said Happy Mother's Day? Oh, damn. How did you know? You just like outed her pregnancy. But I mean, yeah, that is cool. It's like, it's stuff like that that you're like, you can't really fake, you know? You're like, yeah, that was just intuitive. I just gathered that. My mind said so. And I love that. I'm like not a religious person at all, which is why I try to like deconstruct some of like Hijra identity from Hinduism sometimes, especially when Hinduism has been used for Hindu nationalism, Hindutva in India, to oppress people and reinforce this violent caste system. So just like using it as a way to decolonize and embrace ancestral energy and identity. But yeah, that is like a form of like a much realer form of like spirituality, like for me personally. All right, let's hear what Amy Goodman has to say. We'll speed it up just a bit so we can get
Democracy
to more of the content that we have.
Now, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Venezuela, nearly 50,000 people remain missing, 5 days after a pair of massive earthquakes struck near the capital, Caracas. The confirmed death toll is fast approaching 1,500, expected to soar as the window for finding survivors closes. There are reports of several aftershocks, rattling nerves of survivors, many of whom narrowly avoided being buried in the rubble of collapsed buildings.
I feel very sad because of the loss of our neighbors. At least I was lucky enough to save my own life. But our neighbors, young people, full of life, were left in the rubble. And I imagine that if I hadn't left my room, I too would have been in that rubble and wouldn't have survived.
The Trump administration says the U.S. and Iran have agreed to end attacks in the Persian Gulf after the two sides traded fire throughout the weekend. The renewed violence began Thursday when Iran fired on a Singapore flag container ship near the Strait of Hormuz. The Pentagon countered Friday with attacks on what it called Iranian missile and drone storage locations and radar sites. Iran responded with drone and missile attacks on a U.S. naval base in Bahrain and a Kuwaiti airbase. Axios reports the two sides plan to meet Tuesday in Qatar to work out their dispute over the Strait of Hormuz, but Iran's deputy foreign minister later said there were no currently scheduled meetings with U.S. diplomats. Meanwhile, many Democrats are accusing Trump of violating a war powers resolution passed by the House earlier this month and approved by the Senate last week. California Congressmember Ro Khanna wrote, "These strikes are a blatant violation of the war powers resolution we passed. Trump must stop this war now, or we will take him to court to compel him to do so," Khanna wrote. Israeli forces continued to strike southern Lebanon over the weekend, defying terms of the U.S.-Iran ceasefire agreement. Lebanon's health ministry reported at least one person was killed Saturday, just a day after Israeli and Lebanese diplomats in Washington, D.C. signed a U.S.-brokered framework agreement on a peace deal. Hezbollah was not a party to the talks, and the deal does not require Israel withdraw from the vast stretches of southern Lebanon it now occupies. In Gaza, Israeli airstrikes and artillery fire have killed at least 4 Palestinians over the last 24 hours. Among the dead is Eileen Al-Farah, a 13-year-old girl struck by shrapnel from an Israeli tank shell that fired on Khan Yunis. This follows deadly strikes Saturday on makeshift tents in al-Mawasi, an area Israel had designated as a safe zone. Those attacks left several wounded and killed 2 siblings, 15-year-old Islam Musa and her 30-year-old brother Abdullah. The Palestinian Health Ministry reports Israel's killed at least 1,045 people in Gaza since it agreed on paper to a U.S.-brokered ceasefire last October. Meanwhile, the so-called Board of Peace set up by President Trump to govern Gaza is planning a sweeping grant of legal immunity for itself. That's according to The Guardian, which reports a draft of the resolution would also let the Board of Peace obtain public property in Gaza, quote, free of charge. Authorities in eastern Libya have released 10 Palestine Solidarity activists who were arrested in May as they attempted to break Israel's siege on Gaza. Members of the Global Samud Convoy were detained outside the city of Sirte as they attempted to bring ambulances, mobile homes, and humanitarian aid to Gaza. Several countries across Europe.
Yeah, the earthquake that has been such an ongoing disaster, just catastrophic. So many lives that are in peril that we need to be talking about. Hello, Slick Eye. Welcome. How are you doing? I'm doing all right. You know, just catching up on some headlines. We'll get to some of the local news that I have planned briefly. Then we'll get into more queer history for Pride Month. You're chilling. Nice. Glad to hear it.
Have shattered temperature records as a deadly heat wave puts over 150 million people under extreme heat advisories. Germany, Hungary, Czechia, Poland, and Denmark have all set records for their highest ever recorded temperatures. French authorities report more than 1,000 excess deaths due to the heat, with the mortality rate expected to rise even further. Here in the U.S., 3 firefighters were killed along the Colorado-Utah border over the weekend as they battled blazes that have scorched nearly 30,000 acres. They're among 36 major wildfires burning.
Yep, this is something I was going to be talking about today. So thank you, Amy Goodman, because there are so many fires that are out of control in Utah right now. The air quality already is horrendous in Utah because of the oil refineries that we have, all of the cars that are here. It is necessary to have a vehicle most of the time, unless you are in Salt Lake City. And I mean, we have buses and stuff, but like public transportation is incredibly underfunded. This is intentional to oppress people. So this is something we need to keep talking about, but the air quality gets worse and worse the more people that are here, the more cars that are driving. And with the Great Salt Lake drying up, with all of this toxic dust that has arsenic and other toxins that are in the lake bed of the Great Salt Lake, that they are now being kicked up, and people who live closest to the Great Salt Lake are already feeling these effects and have increased cases of cancer. And now we have all of these storms that are happening, and with global warming, that it's making it so we have a lot of wildfires. And this is incredibly concerning. Is it just me, or is there no channels in the Discord server? We had to lock some things down because of some recent events, but I'm still learning the ins and outs of Discord, so I will give you permission to things as you desire, because you've already been part of things. Hello, Linton. Welcome. How are you doing? Yeah, I should have like been tightening up security with the Discord a while ago, especially with like talking about certain topics. But also currently figuring out more of like the interface of it all and how to best do this. So if you all have any suggestions, do let me know. What's new with both of you? Okay, I did see that come through, Aliana. Very cool. Okay. Would have been here sooner, but was in another stream deradicalizing the guy. That's okay. I'm happy to have you here in whatever capacity. Went from a reactionary anti-migrant guy about to attend a pogrom. Oh my god. Wow. Okay. We need to have a de-radicalization channel in the Discord, I think. And also, if you have any techniques that you would like to be talking about, like how you even went about that, this is doing very important work. I'm proud of you, grateful for you. Thank you. I'm doing all right, you know, trying to just be a little more detached from trying to control outcomes at times, of like trusting that the things that I do are getting to the people that need to see it. And like, especially with like job applications and stuff, that it's going to places like, if they don't want me there, then I don't need to hear back from them. So just focusing on what I can control and protecting my energy. This is me attempting at being more mature and less reactionary in many ways, I guess. It was genuinely just stating the basics of Marxism kind of gently until I extracted some concessions, then just hammered on it until it was full agreement. I love that. I love that. Because I think that just goes to show how we really do have a lot more in common than what people think. And a lot of the time, people's grievances, like they have real grievances, but the powers that be direct them to these nefarious channels so that people can be brainwashed and controlled. And that when it's like, oh, you are experiencing real pain with the economy and with like certain opinions that you have, feeling like there are these like upper classes that don't care about us. And then talking about like, okay, so here's our common ground. How about we lean into that? This is great. You should start like a de-radicalizing seminar of sorts. That is incredible.
Across the U.S. as forecasters warn central and eastern states face dangerous and potentially record-breaking heat over the July 4th holiday. A federal appeals court has struck down...
Oh, yeah. So just continuing with this thought. So Governor Flaccid Cox, Spencer Flaccid Cox of Utah, he... I call him that because he's very spineless. This is not to demean people who experience ED, okay? Because there is no shame in that. That is, people, especially when it comes to patriarchy, the anxiety around penises, the anxiety around sexual performance is part of control of patriarchy. So, like, destigmatizing that. But, like, when people are needing to actually have a backbone and have principles, this is not something Spencer Cox is known for, which is why I call him Flaccid Cox sometimes. Also Caillou Cox. He came out and said that, like, we need to ban fireworks, but then also at the same time, with all of this bullshit happening with these wildfires, with global warming, with the Great Salt Lake drying up, that he is greenlighting all of these data centers that are being built that take an inordinate amount of water that we just don't have. So it's like, okay, so you're willing to ban fireworks for just a few days, but not for the entire month, because he doesn't want to upset the Mormons here, because there is another holiday called Pioneer Day, which is really just Colonizer Day. It is celebrating when the Mormon pioneers got to Utah and started genociding and ethnically cleansing indigenous people here and tribes so that they could set up their founding of the state and impose religious dominance non-consensually and steal land, extract resources. So this idea of Zionism existing, like, is in more than just evangelical religions, more than Zionist Judaism as well, but like within like other types of spheres of religion. And Utah is incredibly Zionist. There is a national park called Zion's National Park, which is like this idea of like God giving you this credence to actually take over land. And that is just evil. So he's not willing to do that for the 24th of July, where people celebrate that more in Utah than they do the 4th of July. That goes to show how religiously zealous people are here, and how it is so ingratiated in the government that he is willing to do that more for the 4th of July than the 24th. So I had more grace since it was in the South African context rather than here, but I need to change that since I would probably see the same results with our reactionaries. But honestly, dude was smarter than most of the reactionaries I spoke to here. Interesting. Also, since it's in the ZA context, colonialism is more effective argument than it would be with the British reactionary. I mean, the fact that you even understand these nuances is part of the success that you've seen, I think. And being able to like have more grace for certain people in different areas, or like, I think that is also important of like, it can be helpful to understand of like, we need to hold people to like a certain standard, but like even thinking about like, I can't have as many constructive conversations with like conservative Mormons because there's so much like emotion there. A lot of the time I like understand a little bit too much about it, where I'm not able to like offer as much grace to people as what might be helpful in de-radicalizing them. And that's like my own thing that I need to deconstruct. but also like I may have a better chance of doing that after like leaving Utah where I'm not in it, you know, where like you might be experiencing the same thing of like having more grace for people when you aren't around them all the time. So it's like I think we can hold these things at the same time. It's hard to be very forgiving of people when they are actively oppressing us too. Now they're going to read Marx and Fanon. Ooh, I love that. Then seeing the page count on Capital. Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. We did recently finish reading the Communist or the Manifesto of the Communist Party and an address to the Central Committee of the Communist League that is on the YouTube channel for the stream if they are interested. I don't break it down as much as what like some other people do, especially like academics. But it may be a little more of like an entry level thing. Not to say you have to share that, but good for you. Snaps for you. I'm very proud. This is the work that we need to keep doing.
The Trump administration's rollback of Biden-era limits to soot pollution from coal-fired power plants. The EPA had sought to reverse a 2024 rule change, limiting the amount of fine particulate matter from power plants, factories, and vehicles. Kenya's Human Rights Commission says at least 6 activists were brutally tortured by police in Nairobi following their arrest at an anti-government protest last week. They were among more than 350 people arrested across Kenya last Thursday as the government cracked down on demonstrations commemorating the second anniversary of a 2024 protest where 60 people were killed by security forces. This is Kenyan activist Hussein Khalid.
We are telling the government compensation is not enough, and they will not hoodwink us with money. This is a call for justice, because every time there's a protest, innocent Kenyans are killed because these killer cops are not being arrested. They are not being held to account.
President Trump has nominated a former Oklahoma state trooper to serve as the next director
always
of
and
ICE,
forever,
Immigration
across
and Customs
the globe.
Enforcement. Lance Schroyer currently serves as an advisor to Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen. Schroyer's nomination.
Looking at this person, I don't think anybody would look at this person and be like, that's an upright, upstanding human who cares about other human beings. Maybe this is me just like engaging more in like the woo-woo, also me being a Scorpio, that I'm like, a lot of the time looking into people's eyes, I feel like I can size them up pretty quickly. This is showing layers of self-deception that is just like very clear. He is deceiving himself on like the things he thinks he stands for. But
Comes after
anyway,
former ICE director Todd Lyons resigned in May amidst growing scrutiny over
judging
the agency's
a book
violent
by its
crackdown
cover.
on
That's
protesters
what's happening
and
here.
immigrants. Schroyer has no previous experience with ICE. Trump wrote in a Truth Social post, quote, "The Senate must confirm Lance immediately. Do not delay," Trump wrote. Another immigrant has died in ICE custody. Felix Alcorta Rodriguez is at least the 20th
Wallace
reported
and
ICE
Gromit
death
guy.
this year. The 63-year-old Mexican immigrant was found unconscious the night of June 19th while detained at the Webb County Detention Center in Laredo, Texas. He was taken to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. ICE has listed no cause of death. The Webb County Detention Center is operated by the for-profit prison company CoreCivic. Deaths in ICE custody have skyrocketed during Trump's second term, with the United Nations calling for prompt and independent investigations. In a statement, UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk said, quote, "Those responsible for violations of the law must be held to account, and the rights of the victims' families to truth, justice, and reparation and guarantees of non-recurrence must be upheld," Volker Turk said. Millions of people took to the streets of cities around the world over the weekend for Pride celebrations. Here in the U.S., LGBTQ+ groups faced a conservative backlash led by the Republican governors of Indiana and Tennessee, who declared June Pride Month as Nuclear Family Month. In Hungary, tens of thousands of people braved triple-digit heat to march through.
Yeah, same in Utah with it used to be, Governor Cox said previously it was Building Bridges Month. And then what was the recent one that he said? It was worse. But also, like, it's interesting to see the allies out there be like very upset. Like, they're constantly surprised by this stuff. By like, oh, how could he do this? This is awful. And to many of us, I think especially people who have been out for a bit, it just is like, yeah, this is what they do. okay? But you can't be upset about this happening and then also upset with queer people when they are resisting in certain ways. Of like the fact that you're even upset that Pride Month is being called a different thing. The fact that we even have the idea of a Pride Month is that it started with throwing bricks at cops. So like you can't be angry at all of these things at once. That you can't define what liberation is for people while also like wanting to have these type of respectability politics that keep us oppressed. It's like we do need allies, but we need actual allyship, not people who are going to fold whenever cops show up. I almost de-radicalized an American libertarian too the other day. Wow. But another one of them showed up and dismantled the process. Oh no. Although I have to say, and I don't know if this is me like trying to like cope with certain instances in life, but you never know what will affect people long term. Like if it's getting some of the wheels turning, if you like planted some seeds there that are helping them to start to break these things down, even if there was someone else that came in to like reinforce what they already believe, that like if they were starting to show some willingness to deconstruct these things, that like you never know what's happening like within their inner world. So like I think even the attempt at it is very noble. Libertarian in quotes because they agreed with almost everything I said. I genuinely don't think they knew what libertarians believe. I think many libertarians don't. I think a lot of the time people just, it's like, okay, no government. That's what a lot of people say when they are calling themselves libertarians, which like I guess that's an element of it. But there again, when we're talking about like huge diversity of thought within all of these sort of like political ideologies, that reveals like, okay, there's a lot of crossover between a lot of this stuff, and that like sometimes putting labels on things is not like, it can be helpful to like identify philosophy, but also like labels can also be unhelpful at times when we're trying to get people to see how much we have in common. So like holding all of these things at once, which I know there are some like communists that would be like very upset with me for saying that, but like we have to be able to criticize whatever type of ideology we have, like certain principles we're drawing from, because like otherwise we are subject to brainwashing and mind control, and that is something that any type of movement can be co-opted by. I think this also comes from like having to deprogram myself and de-radicalize myself from Mormonism, of understanding how like even people when they have good intentions of wanting to like serve other people, it doesn't mean that like you can't be causing enormous amounts of harm with that type of thought process. In that like even if people have good ideas, it doesn't mean that like people in the future can't come along and like co-opt movements and language and bastardize these things so that they can have control over other people. It was the classic don't mention the word communism or socialism and they'll totally agree. I know that kind of stuff is so wild, which again is like talking about like these words of like, it's so interesting that people can believe in certain principles, but when they hear certain words because of propaganda, that they're just like, oh no. They're my age, voted Trump in 24, but entirely agreed with every single Marxist. That's honestly why I think like continuing to deconstruct what these things even mean of like Marxism, communism, leftism, that like because people have been so propagandized, it's important to like find the common ground first. I mean, there are some people that like you can't find common ground with when they're coming in with just incredibly violent ideology and rhetoric. Like that's when like you don't like make concessions with people. I mean, this is something we should all be agreeing with, but like people who are fascist, who believe in upholding these systems of human dignity and these hierarchies of human dignity, I should say, that like there isn't a way to like, it's not worth arguing against that. It's like they can do their own deconstruction at times, but like most of the time when people are already believing these things, they will not be affected by any sort of persuasive argument or facts unless they are affected personally, because they have been so radicalized in many ways that like they already view other people as being less than them. So it's like, unless they themselves are affected, nothing is going to change their minds. At least that's kind of been my experience. But, you know, it's like good to acknowledge that people are dynamic, that we are not static individuals, while also understanding where our own limits are in being able to have a capacity for like persuading people. Hone this shit down to a science. Yes. They're gonna, motherfuckers gonna realize their class position whether they like it or not. Love that. Especially because like people can understand class, I think, more than ever, like especially in the US, when for like a long time people didn't even really believe that there was such a thing. Like getting people to have any sort of sense of class consciousness was very difficult until more recently, where like the economy and like things have gotten so horrible for people economically that it's like they are being forced to see class difference, especially with all these billionaires and like data centers and the Epstein class and the ruling class, where they're actually seeing in real time these disparities, and that like that is a huge argument against the ruling class. These people that have normally been extra subservient to them, that they are starting to deprogram themselves because it's impacting their own material conditions. They're starting to feel these impacts personally, which is where there is room for people with other ideology to come in, whether it is further right or left, to come and say like, hey, this is what you're experiencing. It's not because of immigrants. It's not because of queer people. It's not because of people of color. It's not because of disabled people. It's not because of marginalized people in general, or that like you can't get a date. That just means you are insecure. What it means is that there are all these forces that are trying to control you. And a lot of the time people can understand that, and we just have to like keep pushing on all of these aspects of doubt. Hello, Turd Bomb. Welcome. That this is what it is taking. I know. But honestly, this is like pretty, I think especially when people are more right-wing, when they have very fascist beliefs, they want to justify their own existence, their own disparities, especially if they benefit from these systems of inequality and oppression, rather than acknowledging that like their ancestors or like these systems that exist are the things that are getting them to experience this kind of privilege, while at the same time they are still being hurt by these systems. Which is why like it's so important in my mind to be talking about like not just like, oh, these like young white men, they can cause a lot of harm, but we need to be talking about it in terms of patriarchy and through a decolonized lens, especially because it's like, it's not women, it's not marginalized people in general who are making it so that you can't talk to women or that like you can't get laid. It's because of patriarchy and these people who are trying to convince you that like you have all of these grievances that like you may actually be feeling, but you are lonely because patriarchy makes you lonely. It makes you want to hate everyone around you rather than actually, I don't know, asking like a woman how her day is and seeing her humanity. And then maybe you could have like a healthy relationship, possibly. These past couple of days, I've done a lot for my personal prejudices. I did used to have a fairly reactionary stance on reactionary. I mean, I think that's good to deconstruct. It can be hard to dissemble all of this. And sometimes it just depends on the day, especially like who you are encountering. And like, if you have been experiencing a lot of discrimination in certain ways, that like, it is okay to hold that for yourself and being like, this, like, there are people out there that have incredibly evil intentions, and also recognizing at the same time that there are people who are a lot of the time acting in an evil manner because they are deeply, like, sick inside, like unhappy inside, and it's because of all of these systems of oppression telling them that their unhappiness is because of other people rather than the systems themselves. The bar for men in dating is I mean, it honestly is. This is something I was talking about with one of my friends who has been and dating more with queer relationships, and saying how, like, it can take a much longer time to feel physically safe around, especially, like, straight identifying men, when it is much easier to open up to queer women or queer femme people, because there is this understanding already of experiencing more danger. So, like, you're able, like, I'm laughing because it's just like, it shouldn't have to be a thing, but that's also like a coping mechanism of, like, how some dudes can be like, oh, so I have to, like, earn it. And it's like, well, you also exist in patriarchy. This is like the same thing with, like, any person who is experiencing privilege in any sort of manner. Like, you have to show in a very real way that you are not harmful before people engage. It's like, whether that is, like, having proximity to whiteness or being able-bodied or maleness or straightness or whatever the privilege is, that it's like, people should be skeptical. That is a way to protect each other and for people to protect themselves. Feel a whole lot less doomer. I love that. That's amazing. I could use some of that. I think I can be very doomer at times, of like, oh, there's so much fighting that goes on. We're so disorganized, but then also, like, understanding and also that, like, certain messengers are able to be listened to, that, like, messengers matter. This is something I say. This is like me putting on, like, my comms marketing hat of, like, there are certain people that won't ever listen to what I have to say, like, presenting as I do in society. But it means that there are other people they may be more likely to listen to, and that there is, like, a process of deconstructing all of this, and that eventually they may be able to listen to what I have to say, but it might not be what's happening at first. 6 million men have been busted in buying services. Oh yeah, I did hear about that. That was on the news more recently. And I think the number that they were originally reporting on the news was really conflated. Like, they were going, people who don't understand analytics, they were like, oh, this is, like, total number of, like, hits to a place rather than, like, unique users. It's a case-by-case basis. Yeah, putting themselves in danger to have these convos, but myself, I may be able to weaponize my whiteness and gender presentation to break through some of these freaks. Yeah, exactly. I think that is what is needed, of, like, understanding where our privilege lies and using that for good. Like, not in a savior complex type of way, but using it in a way of, like how I mentioned the other day, of, like, being more, like, quite literally at the forefront of, like, when cops are showing up at places that they should not be, which is most places, you know, that, like, putting bodies on the line and, like, having conversations of, like, for me, having proximity to whiteness, being light-skinned, and talking through some things that, like, someone who has more melanin in their skin may not be able to actually enter a conversation and be listened to whatsoever. Hello, Vixen or Soy. I'm a male and I feel ashamed at times. I mean, I think that's good to admit. that it's not necessarily these like, that can be like more liberal arguments of like, oh, it's all like white men or whatever. That's just not the case. It's that we're living in patriarchy, and there are people like the Andrew Tates of the world, like, I mean, the systems that exist that try to say that like you should be angry at the world for people calling out certain privileges. And it's not people's fault if they are experiencing certain privileges, because that's just how people are born or what they're born into. But rather, it's these systems that need to be blamed, and that these systems keep us oppressed. I look at myself and realize I have a conservative appearance, and be patient with people that appear uncomfortable around me. Like, sometimes when I'm in people's homes for work, I can feel like a lady has her guard up. Yeah, exactly. And understanding how that can, like, it's about self-preservation. Like, I know, like, my partner can be very aware of that as well, of like being more like physically intimidating to certain people, that it's like, it's not always personal. It is just what people have come to do because of historical experience. And that like, it's really a shame, but also the intention of these capitalist systems and the people who are controlling them, these very colonized systems, to make people believe that they need to be ashamed of who they are, no matter where you are in it, unless you are part of the in-group, which really most of us are not. And most of us will not be able to get there unless we are born into it. And then the people who are born into it want to justify their positions and be like, oh, we have to create, like the Elon Musks of the world, of like, oh, I have to create all of these things to justify my position in society, rather than acknowledging that I'm an insecure loser who can't get women without having control over people and a lot of money. That is like, it's very weak to not understand who you are, what your principles are, that like you can actually go like toe to toe with someone without all of these oppressive systems and systems of hierarchy that are making it so that people have so much internalized hatred. It's like, it would be sad if it wasn't so incredibly harmful. I work hard to act approachable and kind. Cracking dad jokes. I mean, yeah, like doing what you can. And yeah, it's like understanding that like there are certain conversations that you can have that like other people can't have, when it comes to like demeaning other kinds of people, and how like that is an opportunity to like come in and be like, oh yeah, like saying something that doesn't necessarily have to come across as like extremely aggressive. I mean, sometimes I think that's required, especially if they're extremely violent in their actions, especially, but like their rhetoric, but also like in ways that can be like surprising to people and make them think. One of like the biggest like weapons, I think, in de-radicalizing people is like this element of surprise, of like actually showing humanity. And a lot of the time, this is me being like the Scorpio, like armchair psychologist. Most of the time, people just want to be seen. Sometimes they're scared to be seen, and so they have to put up all these fronts, but also that like they want to be heard. And it doesn't mean that like if you have privilege, it doesn't mean that you don't ever experience hurt. It doesn't mean that you don't experience your own kind of like oppression in certain ways, especially if you're part of the working class. That it's like, we need to be talking about this. As part of like, I was talking about this with my friend as well, of like how there is a lot of bi-erasure that can happen in the queer community. It's like, we can talk about multiple things at once and saying, I'm so high. Amazing. Bi erasure, yeah, of like where bisexual people can be like diminished by identity, if you will, because of either straight people saying like, oh, you're just like exploring, it's just a phase, and then queer people, or like specifically gay people, like whether you're into men or women, I mean, that's along a binary. I guess like being bi also is part of a binary. That, I mean, but not necessarily. Anyway, I'll continue. That like there are many queer people that can say, especially like gay people, which also means like men and women, like that, like, oh, you just are not choosing one, or you are not taking the risk that other people are willing to take in being gay. And I think we can acknowledge multiple things at once. That like bi people, like when they are in like having proximity to straightness, whether they're in like a straight presenting relationship, there is privilege there. They are going to be able to actually hold hands in public without the fear of violence. They'll be able to actually get like reservations to hotels and restaurants, and that they won't be stared at, that they won't be called slurs in public, that they won't be like doxxed or like attacked in many ways. BS, I will stand for my bi friends. Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, we can acknowledge the fact that bi people, when they are in hetero presenting relationships, there's privilege there, and that people who do not have a sexuality that is in proximity to straightness, that they experience more marginalization, and that there can be some harm there, and how it can be, so there is pain there for people who do not have that proximity to straightness or cisness, and saying like, it sucks to be like, oh, I feel like I have to take on more bullshit from the world, from oppressors, rather than actually like having to, like having privilege in certain ways with being in certain kinds of partnerships, or the fact that there are some bi people who can there are some people who can claim that they're bi, but it's a way to like get in a relationship, like getting a third or something in favor of a hetero relationship. So like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like there can be a resentment that builds, and it's because of these systems of oppression, not because of people themselves. Or if people are using these systems to just like reinforce their own sense of privilege, or like use it to get into relationships that have proximity to straightness or cisness, that it can be extremely difficult to parse all of these things. But like, we need to acknowledge that we have to be blaming systems that make people feel this way. Oops. The majority of people aren't ideologically committed to capitalism. Yeah, exactly. Except for like capitalists. People who especially are self-identifying capitalists. There are even some people who are self-identifying capitalists that wouldn't be considered part of the ruling class. It's a delusion. I found class consciousness is not that far away for some people. Yep. A lot already have the groundwork. They're just horrifically exclusionary due to the false scarcity that is manufactured. Yes, exactly. By these systems that want us to fight each other. You can deconstruct the false scarcity, then the rest crumbles in my limited experience. I agree. Why not? Meow. Anyway, I'll stop waxing poetic about this, but thank you all for engaging in these kinds of conversations. I greatly enjoy this. This is why I love streaming.
Budapest, in the city's first Pride event since longtime far-right leader Viktor Orban lost re-election. The march came a year after Orban's government rammed through a constitutional amendment to outlaw Pride events.
It's much more relaxed than last year. Last year was a protest, more or less, but this year is like celebration of freedom.
People are much more optimistic right now. Like, probably it's because of the political change, but everyone is just so much more uplifted at the moment.
And 3 agents of former U.S.-backed Chilean dictator General Augusto Pinochet's secret police have been sentenced to 15 years in prison for their role in the 1976
my logic
murder
is if
of
I
Ronnie
can
Moffett in
engage to
Washington,
this
D.C.
degree off my
On September
rocker.
21st, 1976, Pinochet's agents planted a car bomb that killed former Chilean ambassador Orlando Letelier,
Yeah, I would
along
say
with his
so.
assistant Ronnie Moffett, a U.S. citizen who worked at the Institute for Policy Studies. The bombing took place on Embassy Row in Washington, D.C., blocks from the White House. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just taking care of some things. Also, I'm driving. A bad person for what? Okay, let's get to the history of ballroom, as we were talking about Pride Month, finishing up Pride Month, and how important it is to acknowledge our queer elders, the work that they have done, how so much of queer culture comes from ballroom, even just modern culture, like what a lot of, I'm calling this out, what a lot of young people think is just like TikTok culture comes from ballroom, which was created in the 70s and 80s in Harlem and New York City, and primarily by Black queer people and trans people especially. And it is a way to find welcoming and community in order to embrace who we are and find joy.
Happy Valentine's Day. You look so good.
Thank you.
I really wish I like dressed up now. So I think maybe we should just get straight into it. So how does that sound? Should we just go straight into it?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So before we get into like your ballroom life and like the ballroom scene in the 90s, I thought it might be a really good idea just to sort of contextualize it and sort of paint us a picture of what New York City was like in general as a space to navigate, like as a young person. That would be amazing just to like give us that image.
I can give you an image of when I entered New York City. I'm originally from Philadelphia, so I can give you an image of when I entered New York City. And the image was, well, it was free going. It was very
I'm also going to
special
speed
me.
this
It
up
was
just a bit.
It was dangerous, but it was also a time where a lot of change was happening. And it was a time where we were really united. We had really grown into family units. We had really grown into sisterhoods and brotherhoods. And we tried to, amongst our own families, we did look out for each other. So it was a very unifying time because we didn't have all these labels to separate us from one another. You were either a butch queen or a femme queen, and you were a queen, period. And you were a part of this entity that is the ballroom scene. So it kept us close knit.
And in terms of like, you made that move from Philadelphia to New York, and what was like the entry point for your journey into ballroom? Like, who brought you into it, and where did it really start?
My ballroom, entering into the ballroom, I was brought into the ballroom by my gay mother, Tanya Jalan. I met her at Rose's, a club on 13th and Locust in Philadelphia, one night, and I was outside the club, and she basically just took me under her wing as things go in the ballroom scene. And I'm very grateful for it. She saw someone that she saw a lot of potential in, and she extended her hand and her knowledge to me.
And so, like, how old were you then? Because I know that a lot of stories, yeah, like people come in at a very young age, and it's like a recurring theme. And like, what was sort of like, I'm like 22, and I can't even imagine just going out into the wilderness and just like being out there on my own. Like, so like, what was sort of like the feeling and the emotion like behind that, just to be in this like huge city as like a young girl?
Well, it was very freeing because you have to understand that at the time it was very dangerous to be a femme queen. It was very dangerous to be gay. It was very dangerous to be out. And being that I could never hide who I was, and I was very defined about who I was and who I wanted to be, I had to basically pick a struggle, basically just be myself. And the ballroom scene, finding the ballroom scene the way I did, coming into the ballroom scene the way I did, was a breath of fresh air. It was a place where I could be all those things I dreamed of as a little child without judgment, although they do judge you, but without evil judgment, with support and with care and charisma.
And you mentioned that like Tanya took you under your wing, and I'm assuming like around that time you must have like joined your first house. Can you like tell us a bit more about like being part of a house and what that looked like for you in that early stage?
In that early stage, joining the House of Jordan, which was Tanya's house, we only had like 7 members, and we were very close. We were considered.
Her hair is gorge. I agree.
She had just opened it, and
Venus Mizrahi.
Yet I was able to achieve what I wanted to achieve in it, and at the same time, learn what a family unit was, a family that cared, a family that was there for me. I was able to learn because they taught you unity. She taught me how to vogue. She taught me how to walk face, how to walk runway, how to walk performance. She taught me how to bring it to a category, bring it to life, bring that inner persona out, let that music flow through me. She was very caring. She was a mother, everything a mother should be. Stern when needed to be stern, loving when needed to be loving. All of them, Donnie, Prentice, Kyle, you know, all my brothers and sisters, Niambi, Walisha, they made me feel like I was part of a real family unit in this entity that is the ballroom scene, this entity that is in a house.
And you mentioned like for example, like Tanya was teaching you how to vogue, or like how to walk runway and how to sell it. And like, did it feel like this sort of like completely different world that you were stepping into? Like, how did it feel like finding your feet and learning the ropes?
I didn't feel like it was a completely different world. I felt like I found my world. I felt like I found the place where I belong, the place where I can be me without judgment, without fear of murder, without fear of discrimination, without fear of anxiety or just confusion. It just felt right. Like when you enter the ballroom scene, you enter it on a good footing.
A few weeks ago, I might start streaming at the start of next year. Ooh, I love that. Yes, will you please let me know if you do?
And so
I will follow, I will view,
like I
I'll
said, like,
chat.
it wasn't a completely different world. It was the world which you needed, right? And you felt home, you felt safe. And so like,
Okay,
how
I actually had a
like,
friend stop by real quick. I'm gonna say hi, but I'll keep this playing.
Yourself within that world? And what did it look like from like the moment
Be
you
right
stepped into
back.
the scene to like a year later?
Best methods, arguments for UK context.
I came out of nowhere,
Yeah, and also like,
I battled.
excuse me, you don't have to have everything figured out, you know? Like, you can be working it out as you're doing it. You already have like so much education and knowledge to be pulling from that, like, I think that was something that stopped me from streaming for a long time. I was kind of like agonizing over it of like, well, I need to like understand this, I need to understand that. But acknowledging that like you don't know everything is okay. And that like, as I've been experiencing with all of you wonderful people, that like you can learn a lot from other people and that it can help like contribute. So yeah. Okay, I'll be right back.
I walked every category. I was defiant. If you had an individual, I had so much fun. It was so much fun. I was so outgoing, and everything was so happy, and everything was so fresh and so new to me that I wanted to soak it up like a sponge.
And you mentioned that like you came and like you conquered, and you're this like fresh face on this scene. So like, how did people like react to you? Like, how did other houses react to you?
They loved me. They wanted me. They wanted me in their house. They wanted me to come to the bar. I started off in Philadelphia, and at the time, the Philadelphia ballroom scene was very small. You had a few houses from Philadelphia. At the time, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and New York were the only places where you have houses. And Jersey. And in Philadelphia, the main houses were excellent: Prestige, Jadoo, Ultra Omni, Ferragamo, and of course, Jerlan. We were stepped onto the scene. So, and Revlon. So to have people from Ebony, to have people from New York, from DC, from New Jersey, come to Philadelphia to battle me, or come to Philadelphia to see me walk a mini function, or see me walk a ball, really catapulted me in the ballroom scene, really gave me the stamina that I needed.
And like two days ago, when I spoke to Nyambi, she was saying that during that time, like it was all about like rivalries. But I remember when we spoke, you didn't necessarily have a rival, but you just had enjoyable experiences with a few people again and again. So like, who would you say were like your main competitors? Like, who did you feel excited to battle or get onto the floor with?
I always felt excited about battling every girl. If they were older than me, if they had been walking longer than me, if they had status. My top three would be Renee Caron, Alyssa St. Clair, and Ashley Icon. They brought the best out of me. They really made me go into my box and think outside the box for these categories. Everywhere we would battle, every time we would battle. If I saw one on the runway, I was right behind them. If they saw me on the runway, they were right behind me. It was a time where defiance ruled. It was about being unbothered. It was about being unbothered. You hit the back of that runway and you see the girl you wanted and you went after her no matter what. But at the end of the day, you said, bring it. She bought it. It was up to the judges. Whatever the judges said was word. At the end of it, we left it on the runway. There's always another ball. There's always another function. There's always another time and another look and another day to get her back or to get back.
And in terms of balls that you walked, I remember trying to find videos of you, and I think there's like one from maybe like 1993, like this really iconic video of you. But what was sort of like the main balls that you went to, like some memorable balls? Like what were some experiences that you can share?
The Bazaar Ball was memorable to me. I battled Candy LaBeija, the icon, the pioneer Candy LaBeija for Shea Fest Runway. The first time they had Shea Fest Runway, I lost, but it was an eye-opening experience and it was one of my favorite battles for Runway. Let's see, the Philadelphia Vicky Mizrahi Ball, which was the first time I ever walked runway, and I won against Alyssa St. Clair, Aura St. Clair, and June St. Clair, which at the time were the epitome of runway for the femme queens. They were the girls, they were the it girls, the Versace girls, the Versace bitches, if you were to call it. And of course, my sister, Evie Sugar Milan, who we battled for face once at Vicky Mizrahi's ball in New York, Bobby Mizrahi's ball in New York. And I was so honored, and it was such an iconic moment for me. Even though I did not win, I felt like I learned so much. And that's the whole thing. The ballroom scene isn't about winning. It is about doing what you're supposed to do, your best. Because like I've said, there's always another function. And sometimes that function doesn't come, but you learn more when you don't win than when you win constantly.
And you mentioned how like particular names and like who was dominating runway at the time. But like, can you tell us, give us more insight into like who were your inspirations and like, because you mentioned that you do like quite a few categories. Like, who did you look up to for those categories? Like, who were the it girls of that time?
All right, for Femme Queen Face, excuse me. For Femme Queen Face, I've always looked up to Tanae Pendarvis. For Femme Queen Runway, I always looked up to Aura St. Clair. For Femme Queen Realness, I always looked up to Renee Caron. And for Femme Queen Performance, I always have looked up to Alyssa St. Clair and Tanya Jalan. And of course, Tanaya, Ebony, Alaya.
And something I'm really sort of curious about, and it was a question I also asked Nyambi, because I know that ballroom in particular, like in terms of demographics, like it really does invite a lot of like trans women, like women of trans experience, especially like Black and Latinx trans women, who come in like at a very young age. So in terms of like your own transition and like developing your identity and coming into your own and understanding who you are, what sort of role did ballroom play with regards to that part of your development?
It played confidence. It taught me confidence. It taught me how to be comfortable in my own skin. It showed me that I was able to be confident, that I was able to be comfortable in my own skin, that I was able to be defiant, that I was able to look myself in the mirror and be satisfied with who I saw in the inside. And it taught me how to bring that I saw in the inside as a trans woman to the forefront of the outside.
Yeah, I definitely like can also relate in a similar way. Like even just watching like ballroom videos, like the energy, like you feel like even when you're just emulating moves or stances from a video, it's like you feel confident in your body, you feel confident in your appearance. So I can 100% like get that. I feel like a lot of people can relate to that as well.
Yeah, you feel an excitement, an overwhelmness, a joy, a pure love for yourself, an inner love that you might not feel every day dealing with society, especially in the 90s, dealing with not being able to get a job, dealing with not having schooling, drugs, dealing with drug addiction, dealing with family members, disease, losing someone. You know, all of these things tear us down on the inside, and sometimes we don't shine as bright as we want to. But in the ballroom scene, when you learn to put that aside and just allow that joy and that love and that piece of your soul that you have in you that is the flame that burns, and you allow that out on that runway, it transcends. And it helps you in your everyday life. It helps you through your struggles, because when you're down, you're able to think back to that night. You might not have won, but you gave it your all. You got your tens, them screaming your name. And you just feel like, okay, if I can do this on the ballroom floor, I can do this today. I can get over what I'm going through.
So I'm guessing you very much felt like developing within ballroom, it wasn't necessarily like you became a different person when you stepped out. It was sort of like you took what you had from ballroom and you brought that same energy and the same life outside of ballroom.
And yes, and that's the whole point of ballroom. The whole point of ballroom is to develop life skills that you're not able to learn from your family, that you're not able to learn from society, and transcend them and transmit them into your everyday life. Because of who you are, it is very difficult for us to understand and put into society's boxes. So we must create our own boxes and think later and think outside of the box and find ways to be what we want to be in society from those lessons we learn being who we are in ballroom.
Because I feel like something we were talking about yesterday when we were just chatting casually was how like ballroom, there's like this competition aspect and people say it's becoming too much about the competition. But then you told me like it's always going to be about competition, right? Because that's a staple part of ballroom. But it's about finding that balance between competition, but also self-development, finding yourself, finding confidence, and getting that balance right.
Yes, it is. Because at the end of the day, we must remember that in this lifestyle, in the ballroom lifestyle, it is very competitive. It'll always be competitive. You can't take that out of the equation. Yet, if you balance it out, if you allow yourself to understand that ballroom, yes, ballroom is an entity. Yes, ballroom is a life of its own, but ballroom is also a stepping stone. Ballroom is also a hobby. Ballroom is also a teacher and a learner at the same time. When you balance all of these things out, it is a beautiful thing to be a part of. And it's a beautiful thing that can help you be a part of regular society.
Because like one of the like questions that
Okay,
people were saying,
I'm back.
Nyambi's interview 2 days ago was about like how do we create an authentic scene? Like what does authenticity look like? So it sort of like emulates and like sticks to the root.
Workshop. Okay, I read that. I mean, more for the art than the streaming, but it is a smaller factor in the streaming thing. My oration skills and social anxiety with the streaming. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I can even still, like, there are some days where I'm like, ugh, like my skin is breaking out, or, or, you know, just like dealing with bullshit at times. Like, it can be difficult to be perceived. It's a very vulnerable thing. And to also just like keep trying, I think helps to understand, like, yeah, if there's like something that I say that I don't like, or it comes across a way that I don't like, or like I don't like I want to do better, it can also be like an accountability exercise in being like, okay, so this is what I said or did before that I didn't necessarily like. I need to come back and show that I am trying to learn, you know? Which, not to say that's like the whole point, but like we are dynamic. And if we want to be doing better, we're holding ourselves to a higher standard of like trying to be as accepting and human based as possible, then that means that like there is opportunity for us to hold that kind of grace for ourselves, especially when it comes to like the aspect of us being our own worst critics. I can kind of come from the perspective of like, okay, so some of the like harshest things I've ever heard have like come from family members. And in a way, that's a kind of superpower, I've realized, of like, that's a different kind of like a hurt, of like when people know you personally and are able to like hurt you personally, versus people who like don't know you, or they are categorizing you into like a type of group of like, oh, I'm viewing you in this way, or it's just like discrimination in general. It's like most of the time the things people say are not creative. They're not that interesting. It's not that original. And so it's like, yeah, you just don't let people win. Cybersecurity too, given last. I mean, I guess in some ways, but yeah, I think I've come to realize it's like, you don't let people win. Like, you don't let fascists win. You just keep going. And also, like, as cheesy as it may sound, like, I do have a belief in our shared humanity. in that there are many people who resort to like fascist ideologies or are brought up with it because there's so much like self-hatred and pain that they experience that doesn't excuse their behavior, especially when it is extremely violent and demeaning other people. But like understanding that like how people can get to be a certain way, I think is helpful, not trying to like humanize people who are hurting you a lot, but like even like helping to humanize yourself in those instances. But yeah, it's like if some of the like if some of the like most hurtful things you've heard have like already happened, you know, like what is there to lose? That's my perspective. I don't know if that stems from like not having as much of like a robust sense of self-preservation or if it just is like, yeah, you keep going. Like you should not let people sway you from the things that you're wanting to do, especially with like the good moments that outweigh those moments like that. So like, thank you for your support, but also like truly what makes this such a joy for me streaming, it's like I get to like chat and rant about things that like I am passionate about that I may not be able to in other spaces, but also like the people, for the most part, who show up here and wanting to engage in good faith conversations and learn from each other, that is a very radical thing, I think, these days, to actually want to have a conversation rather than just be trying to like win an argument. Although, like, you know, that there is a place for that, but at least that's like my world perspective, is like the emotions and like goodness that we have and like wanting to have a space for each other. Like that is actually creating a space in the world where that exists, even if it is virtual. That like hopefully this can be a safe space for people to express their opinions in good faith and to have like a sense of community. That is what I hope.
What it was in New York and Philadelphia. And I feel like what you were saying about like, what are you prioritizing in that space? You should be prioritizing fun, community, love, self-development, confidence, expression. And I feel like if that's what's prioritized in your ballroom space or your ballroom scene, wherever you are in the world, that is authenticity.
Safe spaces
like.
begin where
Yes,
people
to be
start
authentic, you have
organizing.
to remember
Yeah,
that. To be
especially in the
authentic is to
physical
be
world.
yourselves. So anyone out there who is by following the rules,
Digital
by
work to be done.
the
Yeah.
platform, the foundation, because nothing can be built without a stable foundation.
Clearly,
You know,
there are
build that stable
cyber wars to be
foundation on
fought.
family, on trust, on shade-free zone, on acceptance.
Yeah. And like I said, it's like part of the way to fight against this is to like, if there is an invasion and we have a say, yes. Like, if there is an invasion or a violation of a safe space, to not concede. We don't concede to fascism. That should be a line. And that most of the time, these types of tactics and arguments are extremely rudimentary and not I'm looking for a specific word, but I'll just use the word creative, not original very much. May I give you a concept everyone here may benefit from? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that can happen. You know? It's like if people are trying to fearmonger, it's not worth letting them win. Because if that is what they're desiring, it's like we have something much greater to be fighting for, which is our shared humanity. I try to internalize that concept of revolutionary suicide as often as I can. Sure, we may face violent repression for fighting for our shared rights, but that is certainly better than to die by the hands of the system while doing nothing to prevent it, because that is what the inevitable outcome is. Yeah, it is one of the two options. Yeah, exactly. That's my perspective as well. I love the way that you put that. Of like, do you want to live your life feeling like you were part of the problem? You were hurting other people? What satisfaction and joy do you get out of that? Do you feel good about yourself by stepping on other people? That concept makes you weak. It takes a strong person to actually go toe to toe with someone who knows what they believe, who actually is able to stand in their own humanity. It is weak to demean other people. That's what bullies do. And bullies come from a place of insecurity rather than a place of self-love and loving other people. That the inclination to want to hurt other people is a very cruel weakness rather than strength. It is hard to be kind. It is hard to want to look for the goodness in other people. It is easy to be cruel. And it's not, the word I was looking for was sophisticated. It's not like there are all these like sophisticated ways of going about fear-mongering, you know? It takes a lot of work and patience and resilience to commit to try and be a person who actually wants to see the humanity in other people. In the physical world, to reverse gentrification or to bring property value down short of shooting into the air, spread bird seeds all over rich neighborhoods. Ooh. Blast loud trap music on boom boxes. Yeah, especially when it comes to gentrification, where people are like, I don't want to hear music. That's like, what? That is such like Caucasian coded shit to like not want to hear music. That's very depressing. Caucasian meaning like colonized perspective, which is a system. Balaclava on. Yeah, exactly. Even just like, I love how you're saying like staring or like looking at people as they walk by. Like actually looking people in the eyes, there is a power to that. Again, this is me like drawing upon like Scorpio energy. Like if people come at you the wrong way, looking them in the eyes and like cursing them or like seeing through the bullshit. Like a lot of the time these tactics are extremely cowardly, and it is much more difficult to actually be toe-to-toe in person with someone who knows what they believe, who has like all of these tactics that they can apply, rather than resorting to juvenile, childish, idiotic tactics that are just meant to be like, oh, this is scary. It's like, I'm a queer person who's multiracial, living in Utah, that I feel like I understand what fear is, you know? And like, if you think you know what fear is, that's cute. I think that a lot about scary movies that come out, especially if there is a perspective that's a lot of like Christian fear mongering, where it's like anything that's like pagan or indigenous is viewed as scary, that I'm like, you think you know what fear is? That's cute. It's like we need to wear that like armor. Anything to make future landlords think this neighborhood. How does this apply to digital space? Trolling, spamming, propaganda, edit. Exactly this, to intimidate them and make them feel like they aren't safe. Yeah, exactly. They'll be trolling an armed paramilitary. I grew up in a poor neighborhood in a part of Africa called Lesotho. Grew up with violence. I moved to the US and experienced a lot of fear. I'm queer too, but now I feel proud and strong. I am glad that you have been able to find that. And that hopefully it's like coming from a place not of like nationalism, you know, of like getting pride from the system of the nation, but coming from a place of like understanding who you are, embracing that. That's very cool. Yeah, and like learning how to resist those things of like the type of brainwashing that can exist in places, and actually understanding where your own worth comes from and standing up for that, that is a very revolutionary thing to do. I saw Sorry to Bother You for the first time the other day. I saw it a few months ago for the first time, actually. I still need to see I Love Boosters by Boots Riley. Sometimes we play his music for Culture Corner. I don't know how it flew under my radar. Yeah, and that's intentional of like these places not picking up advertising for it or like press tours for it. Has easily topped my list of movies. So much content. I know, exactly. Exactly. He is such like a consummate artist. What it means in my mind to be an artist, to actually have opinions and ideas and then have the art be the vehicle for expressing them rather than just creating art to create art. And like there is a place for that, I think, but that often is what like pop culture is, when we have these things are made that are just wanting to generate a lot of money rather than having them actually say something important. But yeah, Vixen or Soy, I didn't address this part of your comment too, but like being a queer person and like feeling like you can be proud of who you are, that is a brave thing to do. Like as a fellow queer person, like standing in your power, it takes guts to do that. And that is admirable. So I'm proud of you for doing that. And that hopefully like that can continue even outside of like national identity, of just like standing on your own 2 feet, and that it doesn't have to come at the price of standing on other people. I Love Boosters doesn't come out here until October. Oh, interesting. Denied the mainstream distribution deals that would have. I saw Boots Riley, like with part of his press tour. He was much more open about talking about his perspectives, which I really appreciated, because I know that he accepted a lot of money from the Ellisons, like $20 million or something, to make I Love Boosters. And that started a whole conversation, which I think is a necessary conversation, but I think he experienced a lot of like personal attacks because of it, where he's like, we're all existing under capitalism. How can we create anything, especially as artists, when we are living in capitalism? And that we are dependent on people with money in order to create things, even though it's going towards like a Zionist genocidal project that the Ellisons are deeply invested in. That like we need to be talking about how to create art outside of these structures as well. That like anything that is more humanizing for us outside of these structures, of not being reliant on them, is very important. Of like just doing art for yourself that no one even sees, like that is a very radical thing to do. It's like I am aware as well that this is on the platform of Jeffrey Bezos. So like we all have to make concessions with capitalism. And that like unfortunately, until we create more of these things on our own, like crowdsourcing things and honestly, like, doing this work in the background of, like, creating art for ourselves and for, like, our local community, like, the more we can be plugged in that way, the more we are creating a system outside of these oppressive systems.
And then you build on top of that with everything that you wish to with everything else that you wish to add into it, to keep it authentic, to keep it natural, to keep it fresh and young. Just be yourselves. Just allow it to grow on its own. Allow it to move at its own pace. For you that are starting your ballroom scenes in your places, I advise to always remember it's about fun and love. It's about having a safe space. It's about having a place where you can be yourselves no matter what. And as long as you use that as your foundation, as long as you keep your family unit, it'll always be authentic to you, your struggles, and your country. Because you can't say it's authentic if it's not based on your struggles, if it's not based on your country, if it's not based on your way of life. Because that's how the ballroom scene started in New York.
Yeah, I love her saying that, of like, where people who appropriate art, it is cheapened because they don't understand where it comes from, and that it can be such an empowering process to embrace where you come from, embrace who you are, and also understand that, like, this is humanizing. It's actively decolonizing to love who you are.
The struggles, the discrimination, and the way of life built this entity that is the ballroom scene. And now for you, there are young ballroom goers that have your young scenes.
I need to step outside for a sec, but I'll be right back.
Experiences based on what you're going through in this day and age, and allow it to grow the way it's supposed to grow and flourish and build.
Thank you so much for that. Another thing I also really curious about is I know that you were there, like one of the first people to be a part of the House of Mizrahi back in like the early 90s, and sort of what was that experience like to be part of like a brand new house and to step out with a brand new house under your name?
It was the most awesome experience I can ever remember. Andre, Sanaya, and Jack really brought me into the house with open arms. You know, Father Aubri Devashrayee was a father figure to me. I had a mother, but I didn't have a father figure at the time. I didn't have a house father figure. And to be in the House of Mizrahi from its inception, from its beginning, was a real eye-opener because I learned defiance from the Mizrahi. I learned to be more than what I was already used to being. And it was amazing because we were such a young house. We had just came out. Father came from Revlon. And coming from Revlon, which the House of Revlon is known for a family unit and family structure, he really built a family unit and a family structure for us. We all actually lived under the same roof. We experienced the same struggles, and he was a wonderful father. He is a wonderful father. And to be a part of that legacy has really meant so much to me. It has meant the world to me. I think that there would be no Venus Mizrahi without no Andre Mizrahi, without no Jack Mizrahi, without no Sanaya, without no Sandy, you know, without no Noel, without no
It's just,
Sean.
hey, I guess
Those are original Mizrahis.
people
without no
exist.
Janae, without no Janet, without no Bobby Mizrahi.
Now I've got to deal with it. It felt so real.
That was, and Buddha Mizrahi. That's.
I know. That movie really is so excellent. And also talking about, yeah, how you mentioned AI, of like, we're getting to a point where like the Equisapiens thing, they're trying to get rid of us as human labor. Like in any sort of form. We're like currently experiencing like being pushed out of working for the state government, for speaking out against data suppression and police harassment and stuff, that like they are now trying to like make a lot of the duties that I had, or like not just in that kind of media work, but media and communications at large, artwork, any sort of writing that is being done by AI. This is making it so young people have very little chance of having any sort of livelihood and income. Young people are really suffering because of that, especially people who are just graduating high school, who are graduating college. They're having a very difficult time finding jobs. Like I experienced that, and I have job experience in the field. So like I can't even imagine what they're experiencing as well. But also how like with all of these robots that they're building, that they're trying to get rid of human labor that way. That like they aren't even going like the Equisapien route anymore of like, okay, we don't even need humans in general. And it's not even enough to understand that they have no sustainability plan, because that's not the end goal. Fascism, late-stage capitalism is cannibalistic. It eats itself. And that it is not interested in having like a long-term plan. It is about domination until there is nothing left to dominate, which is why they have all of these colonial projects for Mars and stuff. They don't care about having sustainable life on the planet. It is just about these very few people who run the world, the ruling class, that they are interested in preserving themselves. And the rest of us, even like the people who support them, who like them, do not realize that they don't look at us like human beings. They look at us as these ants to step on. Not even that, as like worthless. So this is a place where I'm glad that we can be talking about our own self-worth, how we humanize ourselves in the face of these systems that are deeply anti-human, and that these people who are doing all of this are extremely cruel. And it doesn't mean that they're smart. It doesn't mean that they're interesting. It just means that they have power and that they have been born into this. So anyway, let's continue with this just a little bit longer, and then we can get into the reading. The second scene of Othello.
Small our house was. We were small, but we were powerful. And Heidi, our mother, Mizrahi. So we were small family house, very small for a New York house. We were very small. But when we came to Bold, we demolished, we conquered. The children feared us, no shade, because they knew, and they came to see us because they knew when a Mizrahi hit the back of the runway, we were going to give you your money's worth. Win, lose, or draw, you was going to dread the name Mizrahi.
And just on that, so I think like maybe people watching this are like part of a house or thinking of creating a house in the future. What would you, I know you sort of already sort of explained by talking about the successes of the House of Mizrahi and like the environment they created for you, but like what would you say makes a good house mother or a good house father, or what makes a good house for the participants in that house?
I feel as though it's unity and family structure that makes a good house, that makes no matter what name you have. It's about owning it. It's about owning your brother, owning your sister, owning your mother, owning your father. It's about respecting. Yes, there's going to be disagreements. Yes, there's going to be shade. Like I said, shade is part of it's in our DNA, living in the ballroom.
In Lesotho, we have a ruling dictatorship where we were fully suppressed too by dictator.
You know that this individual actually cares about you.
It's free and getting rid of those systems and bad actors and moving on for your own sake.
And you will grow into anything, and that beauty will.
Yeah, especially like these people who then want to justify this position, this system of domination, non-consensual domination, which is why we talk about consent here, what consensual domination even looks like, especially within like a BDSM context, that it is a way to take back power. And that like as we are creating these systems that are more humanizing, like with community organizing and mutual aid, engaging with other human beings, whether it's in the digital space, but especially outside of it. I realize that this is like on a digital platform, but this is me encouraging like in-person relationships wherever possible. That this loneliness, the ruling class tries to embed in all of us is a way to make us feel so disempowered that we don't do anything about our material circumstances. And that is giving in to this kind of oppression. And that when we actually engage with each other in caring about one another, actually like being involved in each other's lives, that is a way to build community that exists outside of it. That's the thing that is really driving me to radicalize my friend. He is set to graduate soon, and the current dynamics of recent graduates falling right into the Industrial Reserve Army. Yep. I remember you saying earlier that like you've been getting tons of ads like for the Army. Like I recently started an account that was just like brand new on a platform, and the way that I was inundated with so much like Christian nationalist propaganda, as well as like a lot of like queer phobic fear mongering, and also the Army of talking about like, oh, you have to be like following, oh, we reached our follower goal. Thank you, everyone. Yay! But like how sad that is. They don't view us as human beings, especially young men. These people, like, I have been saying this for a long time, but like the radicalization of young men is inherently to create soldiers. It's creating an army to brainwash people into being collateral damage. There's a reason why they call soldiers assets, like money, like investments, not human beings, because they aren't treated that way. It's like a little bit ago, I worked with a nonprofit that helped veterans, people who are displaced and didn't have homes. And the way that like the government just uses and throws away human beings is disgusting. And it is part of this industrial war complex that they are invested in all of this media for propagandizing people into making them believe that they are doing something for their country, something that's noble, when in actuality, it is not a shared sentiment. Arms manufacturing. They're engineering firms with the subsidies that allow them to recruit more heavily than civilian engineering firms. Yeah, that's a really good point. Especially with all of these, billionaires, capitalists that are invested in the industrial war complex. It's not an accident that they own things in media. They're buying all up these media companies. They own a lot of like culture, like cultural apparatuses, like industries, like with fashion and beauty and entertainment, and also like pharmaceuticals and food. So like they make us sick and then pretend to be the answer. And it really is just devastating how like there is no limit to their exploitation because they don't view us as equal to them. They don't view us as human beings. And when we actually engage in humanizing one another, that has a direct resistance against what they are doing. I was speaking about the reserve army in the Marxist sense, but the literal army. Oh, KKK. Yeah. Not KKK. Yes. yes. I understand. Jesus Christ. But the literal army is also a huge problem in this regard. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad that like you are able to have that knowledge and also hold the nuance for like the views of like this friend and like the other friends that you are encountering and have relationships with, that like there are all of these forces that are telling people that it is necessary to be part of these oppressive systems in order to continue living. And often that is like what is forced upon us when we have limited options. Like Bell Hooks describes marginalization as having limited options, the absence of choices. And so like when people are not able to get jobs or when people are not able to like create art on their own terms, that is a form of oppression. That's marginalization. And we take back our power when we are creating anything outside of that. Okay. I know we didn't get to a lot of this, but I do want to show it tomorrow. Also, especially for tomorrow, I wanted to get into how colonization is inherently queerphobic, the erasure and genocide of people who are queer in all of these places around the world that have been used for extraction and exploitation, and how it is this very colonized perspective to be thinking that queerness is like a white liberal thing, a white upper class liberal thing, when we have so much history around the world, especially in indigenous communities, showing a ton of queer identity and relationships that is another way to decolonize, is actually keeping this history alive. So we'll get to that. I also wanted to talk about Islamophobia in Shakespeare. It is especially pertinent with Othello. Because Othello it is implied that he is Muslim and that he is not treated like a person. He is really just treated as like a narrative device for the plot, that people are always like acting towards him, like on him in many ways, rather than him having his own personhood. So I washed my gloves, so they're very shiny and smell enchanting. So we're on Act 1, Scene 2. The previous scene ended with Brabantio. He was woken up by Roderigo and Iago trying to say Desdemona ran away and married Othello. They're trying to do all of this like racist fear-mongering, especially with talking about like, oh, like she is choosing for herself, gasp, rather than being told what to do by what her father is saying. And we see that like Brabantio is extremely problematic, with him originally saying like Roderigo, like, oh, I didn't want her to marry you. And now that she's married to a black man or a brown man, depending on where you think Othello is coming from, but especially since he is talked about in very racialized terms, like being called black a lot, directly using that word in the text, that he is most likely black and has deep skin tone. And so that like once he realizes she married someone like Othello, that he is like, oh no, what do we do? So we'll see where this goes in this scene. People just want to live. I try to provide the ideas that challenge the established norms as often as I can without undermining the message by being too pushy. Yeah, it's like, and a lot of the time, I think there are many people who are on the left that may, and who are involved in community organizing, may not realize like how disenchanted everyone is, or even at times understand like how capitalism keeps us just working all the time, just trying to survive. And it makes it so people can't be like learning about other things. Like that takes free time. And when you are in fight or flight, you don't have as much of a capacity for creativity or curiosity to be thinking about a lot of these things. I can put the tools in their hand, but I can't force them to use it without risking alienating them entirely. Yeah. And that is like such a delicate dance as well, of like, okay, so what are the lines that people have? Like, how do we actually find common ground with one another? How do we talk about our shared humanity? And then also, how do we somehow like support one another in our shared humanity, but also like understand there are lines that we each have, especially when it comes to like the discrimination of marginalized groups, of like, we need to be correcting that shit in the moment, and that like various techniques must be applied. And this can also vary depending on the person and the relationship, and like what is needed in the moment. So it's a lot of like understanding people, and that can be a very complex thing, and like a very personalized basis too. Okay, so on to Act 1, Scene 2. Enter Othello, Iago, in attendance with torches. Iago. I'm trying to remember the voice I did for him. This happens all the time when I'm reading things. Though in the trade of war I have slain men, yet do I hold it very stuff o' the conscience. This is my Iago voice. At least, as of today. We'll see if I remember this. To do no contrived murder, I lack iniquity, sometime to do me service. 9 or 10 times I had thought to have yerked him, stabbed him, meaning Roderigo, here under the ribs. Okay, so Iago is telling Othello this, where he's like throwing Roderigo under the bus, which we see people who are very cruel and who have these designs to be tearing other people down, that this is common of not having loyalty. Othello. 'Tis better as it is. Iago. Nay, but he prated, and spoke such scurvy and provoking terms against your honor, that with the little godliness I have... So yeah, just continuing to throw him under the bus. Regina George style. I did full hard forbear him, but I pray you, sir, are you fast married? Legitimately married is what it means in this. The voices you do bring literature to life. I mean, I hope so. That is the goal. I don't know if I succeed all the time, but, you know, at least there's an attempt. This is also me being, like, a theater kid. We have a footnote here when he said, I did full hard forbear him, meaning I barely restrained myself from attacking him. Oh, sure, Iago. Also, if you remember the parrot in Aladdin, his name is Iago, and that comes from this play. Like, someone who's, like, speaking in the ear of someone else, trying to manipulate them. That the Magnifico... Oh, be assured of this, that the Magnifico, meaning Brabantio, is much beloved, and hath in his effect a voice potential as double as the Duke's, meaning powerful. He will divorce you, or put upon you what restraint or grievance the law, with all his might to enforce it on, will give him cable, meaning scope. Cable meaning, like, give him leeway, like giving him some rope. Let him do his spite. My services, which I have done to the Signori, Venetian government, shall out-tongue his complaints. This is Othello speaking. My Othello voice, apparently. 'Tis yet to know, not publicly knows, which when I know that boasting is an honor, I shall promulgate. I fetch my life, and being from men of royal siege, and my demerits, may speak unbonneted. Oh, we have a footnote. Unbonneted to as proud a fortune as this as I have reached. Unbonneted means without deference or modestly. For know, Iago, that I love the gentle Desdemona. I would not my unhoused, meaning unconfined, free condition, put into circumscription the confine, for the sea's worth. Enter Cassio and offers with torches. But look, what lights come yond. Those are the raised father and his friends. You were best go in. Not I must be found. My parts, meaning qualities, my title, and my perfect soul, shall manifest me rightly. Is it they? Meaning his perfect soul, meaning his clear conscience. Hello, Bounce House. Welcome. We're reading Scene 2 of Act 1 of Othello. I'm currently trying to establish whose voices are whose. So this might be interesting. Iago. By Janus, I think no. Janus meaning two-faced Roman god, which also is a symbol for Iago because he's very two-faced, as we have already seen. Othello. The servants of the Duke, and my lieutenant. The goodness of the night upon you, friends! What is the news? Cassio. The Duke does greet you, General, and he requires your haste post-haste appearance, even on the instant. Othello, what is the matter, think you? Cassio, something from Cyprus, as I may divine? It is a business of some heat. Meaning, urgency. The galleys have sent a dozen successive messengers this very night at one another's heels, and many of the consuls raised and met are at the Duke's already. You have been hotly called for, when, being not at your lodging to be found, the Senate sent about 3 several quests to search you out. Othello, 'tis well I am found by you, but I will spend a word here in the house, and go with you. Exit. Cassio, Ensign, what makes he here? I'm sure Iago did not like being called Ensign, which is like the flag bearer, because Cassio has the lieutenant role that Iago wanted. Faith, he tonight hath boarded a land carrack, meaning a large merchant ship. If it prove lawful prize, he's made forever. Cassio, I do not understand. Iago, he's married. To who? Enter Brabantio, Roderigo, and officers with lights and weapons. Marry to? So this is a play on words, saying Mary, like he's saying it like an oath, which is like a swear word, meaning like Mother Mary, and also marry by like civil union. I've not read much Shakespeare, just the required Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet, and then UK curriculum. Yeah, that's okay. We were talking about this the other day. Tan was saying this as well, how like Shakespeare was extremely genius with wordplay and characterization in many ways, but also because of the emphasis of academia and portrayals, like all of these interpretations, like that happening. Hello, Raiders, Casual Revolt. Welcome, welcome. Casual Revolt 1. Sorry. Shout out. Ooh. We are reading Othello, Act 1, Scene 2. I'm figuring out the voices, so bear with me. American Against Fear. Hi, welcome. We're talking about how Shakespeare is extremely genius in many ways, but also how with the constant like reinterpretation of like there is continued depth added to many parts of Shakespeare where there might not be as much depth. Like with plot, there are many plot holes in a lot of Shakespeare's plays. There's a lot of decolonization that needs to be happening, and how with all of the like very smart genius people, like in addition to Shakespeare, who add their own interpretation, that it just like continues sometimes this mythos of Shakespeare. I mean, I'm a nerd. I love Shakespeare, but also just calling that out as well. We add more depth to it than sometimes there is, like with Othello, and how Othello is a very flattened character as he is written. He was quite sexual and very much pushed against the power structures of the day. Yeah, I think that's something that one of the things I love about Shakespeare is how he really railed against form in general, and like created his own kinds of sonnets, like the Shakespearean sonnet, and that was viewed as very like poor form at the time. Also, yes, him being very sexual, he had a lot of dirty jokes, which I love. That's fun. He also was able to speak within like this upper class vernacular, as well as what was considered like the lower class vernacular and like more slang, because as an artist, he was in like both of these worlds. And so he often would be speaking out against the ruling class, like to their faces in plays when they were attending, by like speaking directly to the common people, the everyday people who were there in the groundlings section. IDF. Okay. Yes, very rude of him. Hello, Casual Revolt 1. Very rude, but also very revolutionary, which is fun. Okay. Getting back to the text. Iago is continuing to speak. Come, Captain, will you go? Othello. Have with you, meaning let's go. Here comes another troop to seek for you. It is Brabantio. General, be advised. He comes to bad intent. So Iago's just trying to turn, like, every person against them. Okay. Turning people against each other, I should say. Hola! Stand there! This is Othello. Roderigo to Brabantio. Signor, it is the Moor. Brabantio. Down with him, thief! Iago drawing his sword. You, Roderigo, come, sir, I am for you. So, Roderigo's probably also confused why that was happening. He's like, what? I thought we were in this together. Keep up your bright swords, meaning put away, your bright swords, for the dew will rust 'em. To Brabantio. Good signor, you shall more command with years than with your weapons. He's like, you're old, don't be fighting. Brabantio. Oh, thou foul thief, where hast thou stowed my daughter? Damned as thou art, thou hast enchanted her. For I'll refer me to all things of sense, meaning, for I'll ask, relying on common sense. If she in chains of magic were not bound, whether a maid so tender, fair, and happy, so opposite to marriage, that she shunned the wealthy curled darlings of our nation, would ever have to incur a general mock, run from her guardage to the sooty bosom of such a thing as thou, to fear, not to delight. So this is incredibly racist. He's saying, like, why would she choose you, a black man, over our countrymen? It's like, have you gotten to know him at all? Clearly not. Judge me the world if 'tis not gross in sense, if it is not patently obvious, that thou hast practiced on her with foul charms, abused her delicate youth with drugs or minerals that weakens motion. I'll have it disputed on, argued by experts, which this is also like a racist argument that happens, you know, by white supremacists in general, or oppressors, by saying, like, if there are two people who are part of, like, the so-called in-group with, like, a marginalized group, of saying, like, you cast a spell on them, you have all of these ill intentions, rather than being like, oh, people are people and love each other. Sometimes that happens, you know? "'Tis probable and palpable to thinking. I therefore apprehend and do attach thee," meaning arrest thee, "for an abuser of the world, a practicer of arts inhibited and out of warrant," prohibited and illegal, to officers. "Lay hold upon him. If he do resist, subdue him at his peril." So also talking about how there is this Orientalism and othering put on him by saying, like, all of these arts and practices, like, when it is intentionally trying to discriminate against anyone without a sort of Christian background. Othello. Hold your hands, both of you, my inclining, following, and the rest. Were it my cue to fight, I should have known it without a prompter. Whither will you that I go to answer this charge? Brabantio. To prison, till fit time, of law and course of direct session, call thee to answer. What if I do obey? How may the Duke be therewith satisfied, whose messengers are here about my side, upon some present business of the state to bring me to him? Officer to Brabantio. 'Tis true, most worthy signor. The officer's voice, apparently. The Duke's in council, and your noble self, I am sure, is sent for. Brabantio. How the Duke in council? In this time of night? Bring him away. Bring him along. Mine's not an idle cause. The Duke himself or any of my brothers of the state cannot but feel this wrong as 'twere their own. For if such actions may have passage free, bond slaves and pagans shall our statesmen be. So again, very racist, saying slaves and pagans, really anyone who is outside of their like white Christian perspective, is not going to be accepted. Wait, I just skipped a line. I just skipped these pages. Whoops. Wait, did I? No. Oh, that's just short. Okay. That didn't last as long as I thought it would. Anyway, I was caught up in the moment, apparently. This is indistinguishable from the current talking points. We really have gone nowhere in a lot of ways. From the current talking points, Sir Thomas More shows the lack of a change in thinking most succinctly. I agree. Sir Thomas More definitely did conform more to like the systems that existed, especially with the ruling class, appealing to the ruling class. Shakespeare still could. Like, for example, him even describing Othello in the terms that he does is very othering, and that this could be viewed by the ruling class, especially Queen Elizabeth at the time, to be in support of these colonizing projects, especially of North Africa and parts of the Middle East. So we have to hold that in nuance as well. But also understanding that, like, if we are coming from the perspective that Iago is not very clever, he is just viewing these systems and, like, playing people against each other as, like, a way to get what he wants, that I think it is much more applicable to our day rather than trying to make the character of Othello into something more than what he is, because he is not really given much humanity. The play is called Othello, but he does not have very many lines. Iago is the character that speaks the most, so we see by far who Othello or who Shakespeare thought was the most interesting, and it is coming from this perspective of him being not a black or brown person who was marginalized in England, or as they're saying, like in Venice, where this is taking place, the play of Othello, that, like, if he was part of either of these populations, that he would have a very different approach to how Othello was portrayed, that he would be fighting much more against what was going on rather than just being like, I'll take whatever is handed to me, or like, I don't want to put up with this shit, I'm going home, you know? So there's that aspect as well. Okay, that is the end of scene 2. We don't really have a whole lot of movement there, really just having the characters be introduced to one another, Othello, Brabantio, and Roderigo. Iago already knows everyone, and seeing how their personalities are clashing with one another. We are seeing that Othello, he's kind of like subservient in certain ways, where he's like, I'll go with you, I haven't done anything wrong, but that they're still like calling him all these names, and he doesn't really seem to be like protesting against that. Perhaps he is used to it. That's up for debate. But we were watching last week this really great interview with Miles Greer, who is an extremely smart person and has a lot of really great perspectives on Othello, and saying that, like, we need to decolonize Othello in order to see how empty his character is written, and how this, like we were talking about last week, he often is afforded more depth when, especially in more recent years, he's actually been played by people of color, especially Black men, that they offer more depth to Othello's character than what he is written as, or who he is written as. So we will continue that interview with him tomorrow. I know Raiders, you just got here, but I'm actually going to be heading out for the night. If there is anyone else you think we should raid, I know Androgynous Water often is on at this time. Or maybe I don't think the raid has been going on long enough to do another raid, potentially. I guess I have a little more time. Should we continue reading? I think I do have time until, like, I have about 15 more minutes. Water isn't live at the moment. Okay, good to know. Let's keep going, shall we? Okay, so getting into scene 3. We'll see if I remember any of these voices. I'm game. Okay, cool. I'm like just subjecting you to more Shakespeare. Hopefully that's something we're for. If not, I guess too bad. Okay. So enter the Duke and senators. So the Duke is like who is in charge for most of this play, like the main leader that is looked to, authority, I should say. And senators set at a table with lights and officers. Duke: there is no composition in these news that gives them credit. Meaning, the reports lack the consistency that would make them believable, so he's not believing what people are saying about Othello. First Senator: indeed, they are disproportioned. Inconsistent. My letters say 107 galleys. Duke: and mine 140. Second Senator: and mine 200, but though they jump not a just account, do not exactly agree, as in these cases, where the aim reports 'tis oft with difference, yet they do all conform a Turkish fleet and bearing up to Cyprus. So we have a footnote here. Where the reports are estimates, there are often discrepancies among them. So they are suspicious about what they're saying about Othello. Duke: nay, it is possible enough to judgment. I do not secure me in the error, but the main article I do approve, in fearful sense. Another footnote. I'm not so reassured by the discrepancies as to dismiss the main concern, the approach of the Turkish fleet. There's a streamer called Red PDX Art that is pretty based and in need of some eyes. Ooh, although they might not see the raid. They're very locked in on their painting. Okay, that's good to know. Okay, I think once we have a couple more minutes under our belt, it will let me do an additional raid. Raiders being like tossed about, but hopefully, good content. I'm biased. I need to check them out. Thank you for the recommendation, Linton. I guess I will have the chance to with a raid. Sailor within. What ho! What ho! What ho! Enter a sailor. Okay. Officer: a messenger from the galleys. Duke: now what's the business? Sailor: the Turkish preparation makes for Rhodes. So I was bid report here to the state by Signor Angelo. We have a footnote. Not mentioned elsewhere in the play, Angelus Sorianus was a Venetian sea captain who received the Venetian ambassador bearing from Constantinople the Turkish ultimatum to surrender Cyprus shortly before its capture by the Turks in 1571. Duke to senators. How say you by this change? First Senator: this cannot be. By no assay of reason, 'tis a pageant. To keep us in a false gaze, when we consider the importancy of Cyprus to the Turk, and let ourselves again but understand that as it more concerns the Turk than Rhodes, so may he with more facile question bear it. for that it stands not in such warlike brace, but altogether lacks the abilities that Rhodes is dressed in. If we make thought of this, we must not think the Turk is so unskilful to leave the latest, meaning the last, which concerns him first, neglecting an attempt of ease and gain, to wake and wage a danger profitless. We have another footnote. So also can the Turkish fleet more easily win it, meaning the approaching conflict. Duke. Nay, in all confidence, he's not for Rhodes. Officer. Here is more news. Enter a messenger. Oh boy, there are so many there's so many voices here I'm having to keep track of. The Ottomites, meaning the Ottoman Turks, reverend and gracious, staring with due course toward the Isle of Rhodes, have there enjoined with them an after fleet, meaning joined with another fleet. First Senator. Aye, so I thought. How many, as you guess? Messenger. Of 30 sail, and now they do resteam, meaning retrace, their backward course, bearing with frank appearance their purpose toward Cyprus. Signor Montano, your trusty and most valiant servitor with his free duty recommends you thus, and prays you to believe him. Footnote, with his freely given loyalty reports to you thus. Duke. 'Tis certain, then, for Cyprus, Marcus Lucicos. There we go. Ooh, my Italian's rough. Is he not in town? So again, someone who is not mentioned elsewhere in the play is what the footnote says. Marcus. For Senator. He's now in Florence. Duke. Ride from us to him post haste. Dispatch. Enter Brabantio, Othello, Roderigo, Iago, Cassio, and officers. For Senator. Here comes Brabantio and the valiant Moor. Duke. Valiant Othello, we must straight employ you against the general enemy Ottoman of all Christendom. See how there is a lot of Islamophobia, and they're like, well, you are a Moor, you are also Muslim, so like we are getting you to fight them. To Brabantio. I did not see you. Welcome, gentle signor. We lacked your counsel and your help tonight. So like calling him out. Also, I think when I read anything, anyone who is like viewed as like the royal, like the most royal person, I tend to have them have this same voice. So I guess there's not much creativity there. But not like they're very similar with all of their oppressive tactics, so whatever. So did I yours. Good your grace pardon me. Neither my place, nor aught I heard of business hath raised me from my bed, nor doth the general care take hold on me. For my particular grief is of so floodgate and o'erbearing nature, that it engluts and swallows other sorrows, and it is still itself. Meaning that my grief can incorporate other sorrows without being affected. Bougie accent. Yeah, that's usually like, oh, okay, yes. That's like, take it for how you will. Why, what's the matter? Brabantio. My daughter. Oh, my daughter. Senators. Dead? Brabantio. Aye, to me. Jeez, the drama. She is abused, stolen from me, and corrupted by spells and medicines bought of mountebanks, meaning quacks. So again, this like colonial othering that's like, oh, she's under a spell, rather than actually like being in love with someone. For nature so preposterously to err, be not deficient, blind, or lame of sense. Okay, ableist. Sans witchcraft could not. Okay. He's so annoying. Duke. Whoe'er he be that in this foul proceeding hath thus beguiled your daughter of herself, and you of her, the bloody book of law, you shall yourself read in the bitter letter after your own sense, yea, though our prosper son stood in your action. Footnote. You yourself shall interpret the law as you see fit, even if my own son is the one you accuse. Okay, so the Duke apparently thinks very highly of Brabantio, and is like, I trust you and your authority, even if it's my own son. That's like, okay, have a backbone. Maybe there's a reason I keep doing this voice. The lack of backbone and just idiocy shown by much of the ruling class is consistent. Brabantio. Humbly I thank your grace. Here is the man, this Moor, whom now it seems your special mandate for the state of affairs hath hither brought. Senators. We are very sorry for it. Duke to Othello. What in your part can you say to this? Brabantio. Nothing but this is so. Othello. Most potent, grave, and reverend signors, my very noble and approved good masters, that I have ta'en away from this old man's daughter, it is most true. True, I have married her. Also, again, calling them masters, there is this, like, subservience that is just, like, expected of Othello's character in order to be liked, especially by, like, the white upper class of people at this time. The very head and front of my offending, meaning height and breadth of his offending, hath this extent, no more. Rude am I in my speech, and little blessed with the soft phrase of speech. Phrase of peace. For since these arms of mine had 7 years' pith, meaning strength, till now some 9 moons wasted, they have used their dearest action in the tented field. And little of this great world can I speak more than pertains to feats and broils and battle, meaning combat. So he's trying to say, like, I'm unpolished. He's, like, demeaning himself in order to be, like, forgive my speech, even though he is speaking in, like, a very, in a manner that is, like, indicative of the upper class. He's speaking in iambic pentameter, which in Shakespeare, the noble people, meaning, like, the people with titles, usually speak it. And people in lower classes do not speak in iambic pentameter. I'm trying my best to speak also in iambic pentameter, but I can work on that. And therefore little shall I grace my cause in speaking for myself, yet by your gracious patience I will around, meaning a plain, unvarnished tale deliver, of my whole course of love, what drugs, what charms, what conjuration, and what mighty magic, for such proceeding I am charged withal, I won his daughter. Brabantio. A maiden never bold of spirit, so still and quiet that her motion blushed at herself, and she in spite of nature, of years, of country credit, everything, to fall in love with what she feared to look on. Saying what she feared to look on, instead of who she feared to look on, which is also racist, saying she would be fearful to look on him when he has dark skin. Also, the delusion of Brabantio to be like, I didn't raise her to be this way. I raised her to like white men. It's like, okay, you idiot. It is a judgment maimed and most imperfect, that will confess perfection so could err against all rules of nature, and must be driven to find out practices of cunning hell why this should be. I therefore vouch again, that with some mixtures powerful o'er the blood, or with some dram conjured to this effect, he wrought upon her. Duke. To vouch this is no proof, without more wider and more overt test than these thin habits and poor likelihoods of modern seeming do prefer against him. Footnote. Without fuller and more direct testimony than mere appearances and conjecture based on currently popular beliefs against him. Okay, so once again, the Duke has no backbone. He's just going back and forth of being like, oh, so I trust you, Brabantio. And then he's like, oh, the war leader, someone who I need, who I have to exploit and be in good favor of because he is a good fighter, that we need more proof. So never mind. A senator. But Othello, speak. Did you indirect and forced courses subdue and poison this young maiden's affections, or came it by request, and such fair question as soul to soul affordeth? Othello. I do beseech you, send for the lady to the Sagittary, and let her speak of me before her father. If you do find me foul in her report, the trust, the office I do hold of you, not only take away, but let your sentence even fall upon my life. Duke to officers. Fetch Desdemona hither. Othello. Ensign, conduct them. You best know the place. So he's speaking to Iago, and Iago does not like being called by his title because he doesn't like his title. Until she come, as truly as to heaven, I do confess the vices of my blood, meaning sins of passion. Okay, that's not even... They're married, especially in this, which I don't care about, all of these, like, morality, like, respectability, politics, and bullshit, especially at the time. But, like, who cares? You shouldn't be justifying that. Once again, the flattening of his character to appeal to the ruling classes. So justly to your grave ears I'll present how I did thrive in this fair lady's love, and she in mine. Duke. Say it, Othello. I think his voice changes too. Her father loved me, oft invited me, still questioned me the story of my life, from year to year the battles, sieges, fortunes that I have passed. I ran it through even by my boyish days, to the very moment that he bade me tell it, wherein I spoke of the most disastrous chances, meaning events, of moving accidents, by flood and field, of hairbreadth escapes in imminent, deadly breach, meaning in deadly gaps in a fortification, of being taken by the insolent foe, and sold to slavery, of my redemption thence, and portents, meaning conduct, in my traveller's history, wherein of antres, meaning caves, vast and deserts idle, rough quarries, rocks, and hills, whose heads touch heaven, it was my hint to speak, such was my process, and of the cannibals that each other eat. So again, the othering of like anyone who is not part of the colonizer populace is otherized, especially when it comes to cannibals. This is a common trope used by colonizers, especially against indigenous peoples that they are colonizing. The anthropophagy, meaning, okay, this is where we're getting a footnote. Cannibals, man-eaters, the term is from the ancient Roman writer Pliny the Elder. Shakespeare was also indebted to the travel literature of the Middle Ages, which travel literature is just like colonizer narratives, essentially. And the Renaissance... of the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Whoops. And men whose heads do grow beneath their shoulders. These things to hear would Desdemona seriously incline, but still the house affairs would draw her thence, which, ever as she could do with hasty dispatch, she'd come again, and with a greedy ear devour up my discourse, which I, observing, took once a pliant, meaning convenient, hour, and found good means to draw from her a prayer of earnest heart, that I would all my pilgrimage dilate, meaning relate. Whereof by parcels she had something heard, by not intentively, continuously, I did consent, and often did beguile her of her tears, when I did speak of some distressful stroke that my youth suffered. So he's saying Desdemona was interested in all of my battles and travels, and so, like, this is how I beguiled her, which, again, is, like, very appeasing to the accusations that they are hurling against him, rather than being like, she likes me. She likes my stories. She likes the battles that I've won. My, like, prowess on the battlefield, or whatever. It also goes to show that, like, Desdemona has more depth than what she is shown, like, actually in her character through later in the play, of, like, how many lines she has, what she's allowed to say, what she actually says, that is very subservient, rather than, like, this Desdemona we hear at the beginning. My story being done, she gave me for my pains a world of kisses. Okay, or sighs. This is possibly a translation or like a different type of version error, potentially, between kisses and sighs. So this is very much like Shakespeare nerdy shit. There are like quartos and folios, which are different types of like original texts that Shakespeare wrote that may have some differences. And this was pretty common, especially at the time when people wrote things by hand, and they had to write more editions by hand. and that there are different versions that were written by Shakespeare to have more copies, but then also after his death and even during his death, during his life, there were different versions that like some of his friends rewrote to have more copies of his plays. So there are some differences there in the versions. She swore in faith 'twas strange, 'twas passing strange, 'twas pitiful, 'twas wonderful, wondrous pitiful. She wished she had not heard it, yet she wished that heaven had made her such a man. Oh. During his death and dying. I know. Because there's such a difference. Made such a man for her. Made her into such a man. So exactly. Like there's this double meaning where Shakespeare, there's a lot of cross-dressing, a lot of queerness in presentation, gender fuckery, if you will, of people dressing up as the other gender and then like pretending to be another gender while dressed up as another gender. So like Shakespeare really lends itself to queer interpretation. She thanked me, and bade me if I had a friend that loved her, I should but teach him how to tell my story, and that would woo her. Upon this hint I spake. She loved me for the dangers I had passed, and I loved her that she did pity them. This only is the witchcraft I have used. So he's trying to use like this sleight of hand, it's not even a sleight of hand, but this tactic to say like, this is, like I just told her about my life and like how brave I am, how good I am at battle, and oh, don't trust that I can't speak well, even though he does, and he is very good at talking about his case, but once again, like the way he is going about it is much more like appealing to people, especially white people in the ruling class, of like, oh, he's demeaning himself. Wow, he's showing such respect. Enter Desdemona, Iago, and attendants. Here comes the lady. Let her witness it. Okay. I think this is where I will stop. We'll get before, we'll stop before we get to Desdemona's account. Let's see if it will allow me to do a raid. Oh. It's still saying this. We can always do it next time. You're both live at the same time. That is true. Okay. So, since I do need to head out, what is it saying? It's saying missing parameters. Raid channel. Raid's another channel. Use/unraid to cancel the raid. So it's saying, because I'm normally trying to bring up like the browser. Oh, now it's letting me. Okay. This is showing my technological incompetence. Let's see. Is there anyone? Oh, wait. Let's see. The person that you mentioned before. Red PDX art. Aha. All right, let's do it. Thank you very much for being here, everyone. It was lovely having you here. If you are interested in hearing more about Othello, more of my wild variety of voices, you can come back tomorrow and more days. So behave yourself, be kind, respectful. All right, see you later.